Hey, everybody, welcome back to this episode, live episode of Think Business. I love podcasting, Guy, because Monday I was on a call with somebody who's doing global work, who was working with Nelson Mandela and she was in Switzerland. And today I'm talking to you, Guy Perelmuter, in Brazil. And here I am sitting in Detroit. So I love it. I'm excited to talk to you because you just have an amazing background, and I love talking about a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today. But I want to read a little bit of your background because it's just really impressive. You're the founder of GRIDS Capital, a deep tech venture capital firm focusing on artificial intelligence, robotics, life sciences, and technological infrastructure. And I just kind of a couple highlighting things in 1997, which seems like yesterday to me, but was a long time ago. You were one of the winners of the Brazil Young Scientist Awards. And last year, your book that we're going to talk about in just a little bit was ranked the best science book in Brazil. And so I really want to kind of jump in and talk about artificial intelligence, right? So I was talking to somebody a couple months ago on the podcast, and they said that in Detroit that they were about to launch before the pandemic, where you could be walking through the airport side by side with someone, and you would be seeing something different on the screen than the person next to you. And it would be using a lot of artificial intelligence and things of that nature. And so talk about what in this decade, how artificial intelligence is going to shape the way we, the way we act as consumers and the way we see things in a custom way to just our eyes.
Of course. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here. And just to jump right in, artificial intelligence is a field where a lot of people believe that was born yesterday. But the reality is that artificial intelligence is one of the very few fields of science that ultimately has a very fixed birth date. It was started back in 1950, in the late 50s, at the summer in Dartmouth University, where a group of scholars got reunited to crack some of those interesting challenges that they felt that computers were not perfectly suited to handle, but that if you were able to bring some sort of mimic or some sort of similarity to the way our own brains work, they could push this forward. So fast forward to now, we really have artificial intelligence as something that is not really a vertical, but now it's almost like a horizontal field where you can see applications throughout many industries, and we feel that this is going to continue to grow over this next decade. I think the applicability of AI in many, many areas is just now starting to become very clear. And to your point, the whole customization is something that is actually a blend of big data with AI, because these two things go hand in hand. AI is all about getting as much information, as much data points as you can, so that you can infer different things. So if I look, for instance, at your browsing history and your interests, I can be better equipped to make recommendations, what you should buy, where, watch, or enjoy. So I guess this is why in the future, there will be different sorts of recommendations depending on your tastes and on your own history.
Yeah. And so let me ask you a question. So, I think for some people, it's so hard to comprehend that every move they make, right, on their phone, on their computer, is kind of being, collected, right? And so, I think that's one of the things with, that I've been hearing people say about Clubhouse. Well, if it's free and there's really no product, you are the product, right? And so to me, there's no way to get away from it or around it. And so how do companies use it for good?
Well, there's a lot of, I think, good examples. And one of them, of course, we're in the middle of this horrible pandemic. And I think life sciences in general are a perfectly good example of how gathering as much data as you can can yield fantastic results. So a few years ago, for instance, there was this research work done where people were looking into a very specific kind of blindness caused by a very specific problem with retinas, and the number of medical doctors who were experts in that particular disease is very limited, right? So what they did, they sampled as many eyes as possible, and they taught an artificial system to differentiate between eyes that look normal versus eyes that were presenting the symptoms that could lead to this terrible disease. And then all of a sudden you have this power where instead of having to go to a specific doctor who has studied extensively that particular disease, you now have a system that has learned how to identify the early signs, and then you can proactively, get something done. And this has been true not only to your eye, regarding your eyes, but also with some mammograms or other types of image exams, MRIs and X-rays. So I think that one of the things that people really, I think, fail to appreciate when it comes to big data is that when you are targeting that type of technology for good, the results may be quite impressive. You can have a lot of pain and suffering erased from people's lives because you are proactively being able to monitor their health conditions.
I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that Amazon can now track a woman and track to see if a woman is pregnant before they even know they're pregnant based on their purchasing history. I heard that on a podcast. I don't know if it's true or not.
No, actually, this is a story, and it was, if I'm not wrong, it was first reported in a book called The Power of Habit, and I think it was, and it was Target actually, and the story goes like this: this father. One day he storms into a Target store, and I think it's Minnesota, but I could be wrong. And he says, "Listen, you guys have been sending, a lot of inappropriate advertising to my daughter, trying to sell her a cradle and diapers and stuff. She's only 16 or 17, so that should stop, right?" And then a couple of weeks later, apparently this gentleman apologized to the store because in fact, his daughter was pregnant. She, of course, hadn't told him, but she was already making purchases that really sent an alert within the systems of the chain, of the retail chain, telling them that yes, this young lady is probably pregnant because of the pattern of the purchases she's making. So yeah, we are being watched. And there's, as everything in life, there's a good side to it in the sense that we get, things that probably are better suited for our needs and are going to be more to our liking. But there's also the flip side where sometimes people are not even aware that they're being tracked and monitored.
Yeah. So let's talk about, thanks for all that. So let's talk about you and your book for a minute. You wrote this book. It was considered the best science book in Brazil last year. It's called Present Future. Tell us a little bit about the book, because it sounds fascinating.
Sure. So basically, one of the common things that we've been hearing, right, you and me and everybody who's watching us and hearing us, is that we live in this brave new world of technologies, right, and technological advancements. And the book has a lot of history to it, in the sense that we try to really situate people when it comes to why this is such a special moment and why things are getting faster and faster. And if we think that the last, 30 or 40 years in terms of technology were incredibly earth-shattering, the next 30 or 40 years are going to be even more incredible, because this is the nature of change, accelerating each interaction and making things even more easier to use, easier to develop, easier to test. So the book tells folks about everything that is probably going to drive our lives, both personally and in our business world, when it comes to biotechnology, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrencies, autonomous vehicles, new materials. So all the stuff that is really flooding the airwaves, and that now is really changing industries and businesses and governments and education system and all that. We try to give people a little bit of historical context on how we came here, and give a little bit of visibility on what we believe is inevitable, right? What
Yeah.
are the changes that we surely know that will happen over the next few years?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Pre-COVID studies were showing that 85% of jobs that exist in 2030 don't exist today. And when you wrap in everything that you're talking about, it's almost how does a company even plan out 10 years when part of their growth will be accelerated and amplified by technology that isn't even invented yet, but will be in the next 3 to 5+ years. And so, as you're writing this book and as you're looking at, cars where you don't even have to drive any longer, and cryptocurrency and cashless societies and, things of that nature. I remember reading a book 20 years ago by Seth Godin called Permission Marketing. And he was talking about, like, when you go somewhere and you buy a book, they're going to say, hey, other people bought this book. And that was groundbreaking at the time. And that was only, I think, 15, 20 years ago. Now, fast forward a couple of decades, this next decade, I hear what you're saying. Things are getting faster and faster. How do you grow a business from your perspective, knowing all this information? How do you grow and stay ahead of the curve and not fall behind?
That's a great question. So I'll start by quoting someone who wrote a phenomenal book back in the 60s called Libraries of the Future. It's a psychologist, computer scientist. His name is Licklider. And this gentleman, he wrote something that goes something like this. Humans often overestimate what they can achieve in 12 months and always underestimate what they can achieve in a decade, which is something that is very familiar, because we always feel that we're going to be able to do more than we actually are able to in the relatively short term, but we never can possibly imagine what's going to happen, or how powerful our incremental changes, and I know you talk about that often, the powerful effect that this can have over a compound period of time. So if you are a business and you're looking at the future, I think there are two things that you have to be very much aware of, right? The first thing is, what are the inevitabilities, right? What is inescapable? What are the things that are actually going to happen regardless of pretty much anything, right? So you can look at, for instance, energy demand. The world is going to need more energy, right? We're driven by power, by electricity. Second, we're going to live longer. There's no two ways about it. We're going to have longer lives and probably healthier lives. Third, we're going to be more people around, right? We're going to be 10 billion people in 2050. So we need more food, transportation hubs, technology, energy, and so on and so forth. And finally, one thing that is also inevitable is that we're seeing a consistent flow from people that live in rural areas to urban centers. And this is going to continue to grow. This is a trend that has been building for the last millennia. So this is not going anywhere. So that's evidence A. Evidence B is, and if you look at those studies, and you're absolutely right, there are many studies out there that look at the number of jobs that are going to be created and destroyed, and which ones are going to survive and the ones are not going to survive.
Right.
But not wanting to oversimplify a very complex issue, I think that there's one conclusion that all those studies, I think, agree upon, because there are studies that tell you that half of the jobs that exist today are going to be destroyed in the next 2 or 3 decades. There are studies that tell you that it's more like 10 or 15%. But the common denominator among all those studies is that the subjective aspect of human interaction is going to become more important. So jobs where there's a strong component of subjectiveness, interaction, human touch are probably the ones that are not going to go anywhere, which is phenomenal news for you, right? Because
Yeah, that was great.
what you do is all about, dealing with people and strategies and the way, you perceive the world around you. But the fact of the matter is that there are so many jobs that are going to be created over the next few decades, and probably the best bet for a student or someone who really is planning on where will I fit in this brave new world is you have to do everything in your power to learn how to think, to learn how to find out, and to be able to extract information, be a lifelong learner, be someone who's able to develop your skills, because everything you need to develop a specific set of skills is out there. If you dig hard enough, if you look for that hard enough, long enough, you're going to find courses online that will teach you roughly everything, technically speaking. But this whole human aspect, the whole interaction aspect, this is something that is going to be very, very hard for technology to disrupt.
Well, I think one of the things, what you're talking about, what I love about what you're talking about right now is that, is the paradigm of shifting how to think. Pre-COVID, a lot of companies were talking about, a lot of people, the world was talking about that colleges and just in general, we had to learn how to, adaptability was really the key. And colleges, from what I had been hearing, were figuring out how to teach adaptability more so because they didn't know how to teach to jobs that don't exist yet. So learning how to adapt. What I love what you're talking about is, we're getting more information by the day. The information that we're getting is faster and faster. But what you're saying is there's still huge value and benefit in someone being able to think at a higher consciousness, being able to take all of the data, extract it, and then be strategic with it in the output, which to me is going to require a lot of, not only to do that on your own, but through in collaboration with other people, thinking the same way.
100%. And
Yeah.
if you look at the way we behave as a society, if you look at one of the biggest pains in the whole COVID catastrophe, it has always been about the lack of communication, the lack of interaction, the lack of proximity, right? We are social animals, right? And although Zoom and Google Meet or Microsoft Teams and all those tools are great to get you going and to keep the conversation flowing, people still miss and need that interaction around the table where everybody is being able to read body language and micro expressions and all the subtle interactions that make humans, so unique when it comes to development of species.
Yeah, it's interesting. My question for you is, how many years did this last year accelerate all of this?
Yes, there have been a lot of talk. So I think the consensus is that this whole pandemic pushed fast forward things anywhere from 5 to 10 years in terms of the digitalization and the adoption of new technologies. And certainly in my business, which is deep technology, right, which is basically investing in science-driven companies, I can tell you that there has been more awareness from the part of investors that this is, again, inevitable, right? We are going to live in a world driven by science, driven by technology, and everything you can do to be mindful of that and to use that to your advantage is a positive. So I think that this has been, at least from my perspective, a very interesting and very significant mind shift for many investors.
Yeah. I find it fascinating what you're talking about, because a year ago, a little over a year ago, how many companies, I'm a business coach, I work with companies all over the world, how many companies were so scared of flex time, hybrid models, working from home. It was the millennials only that were kind of moving that needle. And there was so much pushback because so many companies were so scared of that model. And then within 2 weeks, everybody started kind of post-COVID, everybody started kind of getting on that. And now we're seeing major shifts as far as, what the new hybrid normalcy is in companies all over the world and how they're interacting. Do you see, I'm curious with your research, companies going back to the office full time or hybrid models?
Yeah, I think the historically speaking, right, the pendulum typically swings too much to the left and then too much to the right, and then it finds some equilibrium. So I don't believe that we're now getting rid of the office for good. I think there's need for interaction. I don't think everybody is blessed and lucky enough to be able to handle workload from home, to have your high-speed internet in your home office and your equipment around you. But I certainly believe that a lot of people, I think, realized how many inefficiencies their day-to-day lives had when we were 100% offline. And
Yeah.
I think that there is a little bit of optimization to be made between the online and the offline world. So I, for sure, I do a lot of traveling in my job, right? Like a lot. And I do believe that now it will be very clear after everything is said and done. And I don't think we're done, not by a long shot with this pandemic. But when this thing is done, I think that this is going to change. I don't think we're going to go from 15 international trips a year to zero, but I certainly think that we're going to be able to scale that down. And I think that even more importantly, we're going to be able to be more rational when it comes to how we're going to use our time and how we're going to use our working hours.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think we need to see people, but the efficiencies, the effectiveness, the unnecessary travel and unnecessary meetings for a 1 hour meeting,
Exactly.
that's just going to change. Absolutely. Before we move into a quick speed round, I'm a big believer that success in business of where you land is not a straight line, and it's always hard to kind of see what that path is going to look like. And so give us a 1 minute. And I love the question now because people who are graduating college, their journeys over the next 10, 20 plus years is going to be really interesting to watch for them. And so give us the 1 minute Reader's Digest version of your journey on how you got to today.
Okay, so I have a technical background, right? I'm a computer engineer by training. I studied electrical engineering in my master's, specifically artificial intelligence, even more specifically computer vision. I worked for almost 20 years in the financial markets doing risk management and asset allocation. I became an angel investor 20 plus years ago because that's where I really felt comfortable by marrying both my technological background and my financial expertise. A few years ago, I decided to become a full-time venture capitalist, so I started GRIDS Capital, and the thesis is all about these changes that are going to sweep businesses throughout the world, and no matter what type of business you own or you have, change is going to come. And hence, we felt that the idea behind GRIDS should be all about allocating time and resources into those changing technologies. And I think that that has been proven the right approach and the right strategy, at least so far.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, you ready for a quick speed round, Guy?
Let's do it.
All right. Favorite book and why?
Favorite book. Jeez, that's a hard one. So I think I'm going to talk about a recent book, right? It's called A Present Future: Business Science and the Deep Tech Revolution. It's
right.
all about the changing face of the world. A lot of love and research went into that book,
Yeah.
so I couldn't recommend it more.
All right, good. I can't wait to dive in. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
There's no favorable wind for those who do not know where they're going to.
That's
I
good.
absolutely love this one. It's by Seneca, a Latin philosopher, and I think it's so true and so applicable to all of our lives.
Yeah, I love it. Finish this sentence. One thing every business person needs to do to raise their consciousness when it comes to artificial intelligence is?
Read.
Yeah.
You have to read. You have to read. You have to study. You have to do the put in the hours, right? You're not going to be able to crack this one just by will. You have to read and you have to study.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love this talk. I could talk to you for hours about this. I think it's so fascinating. But I just I have a couple final thoughts I want to share. Some of the things you talked about were you got to read, you got to study, you got to kind of figure out how this is going to affect you and your business and how you can start incorporating into it. Things are moving faster than ever. This decade has been, this is everything because of COVID has been accelerated 5 to 10 years. And so you got to really, get with the program and understand how this is going to affect and not only your business, but how you lead and how you run your business. So I can't thank you enough. And I think that, the book can be bought on Amazon, Present Future, by Guy Perelmuter. And, I can't wait to dive in and read it. Even your table of contents is set up so nicely so you can kind of, flow with the book. Any final thoughts that anybody should be thinking about when it comes to the next decade?
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to be very mindful of how we're spending our time. This is the one commodity we do not have, a backup for. So, hours using technology are great, but nothing replaces family, personal relationships, offline living. That's very, very critical. So that's probably my final message.
I love that. And then I'll echo one thing as far as we all have to get better at rethinking how we think, extracting information.
Yes.
So I love that. I'm a business coach that works with people who are stuck and get them unstuck. So I love interviewing people like you that give content and information to get people unstuck and really open up their minds to rethink how they're thinking. Think community. If Guy can help you, please reach out to him. I'll let him give his contact information. But you can also, to continually get unstuck, download my book or my ebook at johndwoskin.com. And Guy, tell everybody how they can connect with you.
Yeah, you can just go to presentfuturebook.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can reach out, and we'll love to hear from you.
I love it. Guy, this was great. I loved it. I can't thank you enough for taking time to be on Think Business. Send me as many articles as you possibly can. I'd love to, continually read up on all of this. Stay on for just a minute. Think community, thanks so much for tuning in. Guy, it was a pleasure talking to you. Stay on for just a sec.
Thanks for having me.